This is America, a country Benjamin Netanyahu often calls Israel's greatest ally. For decades, the two countries have shared a deep and strategic alliance, with Israel's influence reaching right into the heart of the two major political parties. But growing tensions over foreign policy goals have put that relationship into question, as well as created a make-or-break moment for politicians. I'll have more on that later. But first, Neave Barker is in our Washington studio.
Thank you, Roz. Well, the Trump administration has secured a fragile truce to end months of direct military conflict with Iran. And the shockwaves are not only tearing through the bedrock of American politics, but putting one of its strongest alliances to the test. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, at the White House and ask whether America's relationship with Israel right now is experiencing a fracture or just a bit of friction. By ordering Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to cease strikes on Lebanon and Iran, President Trump's exposed a profound rift within his own party. Traditional conservative hawks versus a rising non-interventionist America First movement. In the Democrat Party, a progressive surge against AIPAC, the powerful multi-million-dollar pro-Israel lobbying group, threatens to upend the political establishment. All of this playing out as the decades-long US-Israeli relationship is being tested at the highest level.
I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon.
We have common goals. Sometimes we have, as in the best of families, you have these tactical disagreements. We always find a way to work them out.
He's very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do.
President Trump and I have known each other for many years. He's the President of the United States, and I'm the Prime Minister of Israel. Many times we see eye to eye, and there are also times when we don't see eye to eye. I'm responsible for Israel's security interests, and I insist on them.
Without the United States, there would be no Israel.
And the alliance isn't only being tested between President and Prime Minister, it's also driving a wedge through the broader conservative movement. What was once a safe bet for baseline support for Israel isn't so clear now.
Well, we have a lot of allies in the region, really, because all your allies are saying don't do this. They've all said don't do this, except for Israel.
If the United States is going to have a close relationship with Israel, if they're going to be our close ally, or important ally, or even our friend, tell me why that's good. Stop yelling at me.
They have lost support amongst their dearest friends. And even the entire Democrat Party here in the United States has turned against them, and they're losing Republicans by the day here in America, which is their most important ally.
Well, the US has been supportive of Israel for nearly 8 decades, with only the mildest of tensions between President and Prime Minister erupting in the last 15 years or so. Bipartisan congressional support for Israel has been more robust until this year, with fractures never before seen within the Democratic and Republican parties. Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan explains.
The president of Israel, Dr. Chaim Weizmann, meets America's president, Harry Truman, and gives him a...
Since 1948, it's been a balancing act for U.S. presidents between supporting Israel and maintaining ties with Arab nations.
The people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you.
An American president must make a decision that does not, in effect, give the Israelis a blank check.
But the 1973 October War marked a turning point in U.S.-Israel relations, from a cautious support to a strategic partnership in which Israel became a key U.S. ally in the Middle East.
Our number one commitment in the Middle East is to protect the right of Israel to exist permanently, and to exist in peace.
But this year, the balance may have been disrupted because of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. At the center, President Donald Trump, who has announced a deal with Iran this week that on the surface ignores Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's priorities, deposing the government in Tehran and its proxies, including Hamas and Hezbollah. Republicans and Democrats here on Capitol Hill are trying not to tip the scales when it comes to their traditional bipartisan support for Israel. But public criticism is making that harder. After decades of accepting campaign donations from AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobbying group, a growing number of Democrats is turning the money down under pressure from their constituents. Even progressives, such as Senator Bernie Sanders, have been blasted for supporting Israel's right to exist.
I think, and I hope that as most people in this room know, I led the effort in the United States Senate to end U.S. military aid to Israel.
On the Republican side, Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie, one of the most prominent Republican critics of U.S. policy toward Israel, lost his re-election bid because he opposed Trump's decision to wage war.
I think the most candid answer came from the Secretary of State, who told the press that Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war.
But for every Thomas Massie, there's a Senator Tom Cotton who wants to expand intelligence sharing between the U.S. and Israel, a proposal that has angered some voters. The U.S. already provides $3.8 billion in military aid to Israel every year. The U.S.-Iran agreement might go beyond ending the war. It is exposing the growing strains in the American-Israeli relationship. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Okay, well, let's bring in our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, who's at the White House. Good to see you, Alan. So firstly, what makes this presidency different when it comes to maintaining that U.S.-Israeli alliance, Alan?
Well, Donald Trump has credit with the Israeli government. In his first term, he was the president that finally moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He didn't make a big fuss about the growing settlements in the occupied West Bank, unlike Barack Obama. But he did get angry this time around when Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to undercut him when it came to his making a deal with Iran. He was very angry, profanely so, with Benjamin Netanyahu when he started striking targets in southern Lebanon and in Beirut, and that risked the deal. And Donald Trump saw that as a much bigger deal than the fact that Israel was attacking people they perceived as their enemies. Now, Donald Trump has often talked about the relationship and how he is well liked in Israel. And there's been talk too among Republicans who are concerned at the fact that they felt that this time they were dragged into a war, given credence by what Marco Rubio said about Israel attacking and then the US attacking as well. So there are growing voices here, and that could well impact Donald Trump's support in Israel because they don't like this deal. And if that support starts to go down, it could impact not just the relationship Israel has with this White House, but also the relationship it has with America.
Many thanks for that. Alan Fisher, our chief US correspondent there at the White House. Well, let's introduce our guest panel now. Michaelah Montgomery is a conservative activist and political commentator, and Mark Pfeifle. He's a Republican strategist and former White House national security advisor. A very, very warm welcome to This Is America. Good to have you in the studio. Mark, if I could start with you, if I may, because in Washington circles, Israel is often regarded as something of a US proxy in the same way that I guess Iran has regional proxies, in Yemen, the Houthis, or Hezbollah in Lebanon. But a proxy is supposed to toe the line, isn't it, when it comes to its main sponsor? When Benjamin Netanyahu ignores a Trump-brokered breakthrough with Iran and has to be told publicly to stand down, isn't that proxy now wagging the dog? Isn't that bad for American security?
So I think that Israel, its challenge is that it very much wants the pressure to continue on Iran for their own existence. Donald Trump wants the pressure to come up with a deal, and that's where the challenge is right now. And as far as a proxy, in some ways, yes. So the United States spends about $4 to $6 billion a year on Israeli aid. It also spends about $1.5 billion on Jordanian aid, about $1.5 billion on Egyptian aid, several hundred millions of dollars for Lebanon. All of those countries surround Israel. So it's more of that challenge that the United States has had for 47 plus years of trying to protect Israel and trying to battle against the Iranian regime. And really it comes down to the fact that for all that time, the United States and our citizens have heard about Hamas. We've heard about Hezbollah. We've heard about the Ayatollahs in Iran and the supreme leaders and how their hate for America is. But we haven't heard from Israel, and what we haven't been able to get and achieve is what is a solution for peace in southern Lebanon, in Gaza, with Iran. And I think that that's why America's patience, because of all these long wars, is growing shorter. We still have a good relationship with Israel, but it's not on the autopilot that it probably was in previous years.
Not a good relationship, but how then does the United States get Israel to toe the line? I mean, is cutting aid an option? Is that the only way of reasserting key authority here?
I think that's one thing, and I think both the Israelis and the U.S. is kind of looking at that possibility. But it comes down to, can this negotiation that's now going to happen, that is going to be signed on Friday, can that actually turn into a long-term peace? Or will the Iranians use the lifting of sanctions, this $300 billion fund that's being set up, to just put more arms and more dependency on these Iranian proxies that we talked about? Are they going to stop funding Hezbollah in southern Lebanon? Are they going to stop funding the Houthis in Yemen? The militias that are going on in Syria, in Iraq, and other places? Or will this just continue, this long-term bad situation in the Middle East?
Michaelah, turning to you, it sounds like it's far too complicated a picture to just say, look, we're going to make sure that the revenue streams, the cash going directly to Tel Aviv immediately stops to leverage some kind of influence over Israel. How do you see it?
I think that when it comes to our relationship with Israel, right, it goes all the way back to its founding. I also believe that the rift, much to his point, is caused by a lot of people simply not understanding here what's going on. I don't think the solvency here is to get anyone to play hardball. I think it's more so to educate the masses on why we're there in the first place, why we have such a strong allyship with them in the first place. What does regional stability in the Middle East really look like? Because for a lot of your average voters, regional stability isn't something we think about because we live here in the United States. We've never had to worry about regime change or a coup or anything of that nature happening here. Human rights violations happen here, they get dealt with. So if they're going on in other places, it's important for people to understand why the United States would feel obligated to ensure that humans all over the place have the right to live and have the right to, just the pursuit of happiness.
Well, you made an interesting point there. Do you think that message has become muddled, Mark? I mean, how would you simplify why the US has this relationship with Israel right now?
So I think it's not anti-Israel, but it's American fatigue. So I worked for the National Security Council. We were in this Iraq war from 2003 until 2009 or 10. We were in Afghanistan for several decades. We've had this battle, this silent Cold War against Iran for pretty much my entire adult life. So I think it's more of fatigue for the United States and looking at it and saying, like, I go back to last October when the Gaza peace treaty was signed, the ceasefire in Egypt. And Donald Trump, the American president, asked Mr. Netanyahu to come to that event, kind of show that he's looking forward to kind of a new relationship and how he can actually work with his Middle East partners and other people in the international community. Mr. Netanyahu decided not to go. And I think that sends a signal that really what America is looking for is solutions right now. We're $40 trillion in debt right now. Our children or grandchildren are going to be paying for this. To continue that type of support in the Middle East for the long term, I don't think those blank checks are going to be written anymore in the foreseeable years.
Let's get an understanding of where opinions are on this, because I've got some data for you to mull over. Let me read you this, because a recent New York Times Siena poll shows that 29% of potential Republican voters think Trump has been too supportive of Israel. And opposition to Israeli aid among Republicans has jumped to 37%. What do you make of those figures, Michaelah? I mean, it appears that public opinion is wildly different to the reality on the ground, isn't it?
Yep, and much like I said earlier, it's about educating people about what's going on there. I don't think people understand the different innovation that we're exploring over there when we are working with Israel, whether it be with medtech, whether it be with education, all sorts of different sectors. And so, again, I understand why people feel like we're doing too much for this one little country so far away from us. We can understand why, when we have so many problems here in America, why people wouldn't understand the concept of so much foreign aid when we have so many domestic issues. But again, I don't think anybody has really taken the time to break down to the average voter, to the average American, what exactly this relationship is, what benefit we get from working with our brothers and sisters across the water.
On that note, I mean, there have been some politicians that have attempted to lift the lid, particularly on the relationship with the very, very powerful Israeli lobby, AIPAC, and we've got an explainer on that a bit later on. But before we move on, I want to play you a clip of a Tucker Carlson interview with Thomas Massie, former Republican representative for Kentucky's 4th Congressional District from 2012 until his defeat in that Republican primary in May of this year. Here he shares his experience of AIPAC's influence over US politicians, even suggesting that lawmakers are assigned minders to influence decision-making. Take a listen.
Well, I have Republicans who come to me on the floor and say, I wish I could vote with you today. Yours is the right vote, but I would just take too much flack back home. And I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC.
All right, so you don't get lost in the weeds. Let's give you an idea of what AIPAC is all about. The acronym stands for the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, and it advocates for Israeli interests to the US government. It also gives funding for Democratic and Republican candidates who support a strong US-Israel alliance. It was founded in 1954 and was originally called the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. The idea is to engage with the executive and legislative branches of government to promote policies it believes will support Israel. All right, back to the discussion here. Michaelah, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this because you argue that American leaders must listen to voters and avoid these foreign wars. Yet in Kentucky, pro-Israel groups spent millions to unseat Representative Thomas Massie, and the man Donald Trump backed ended up going on to win that race. Why is the leader of your movement helping to oust the very lawmakers who seem to be very vocally opposing these foreign wars?
Thomas Massie was opposing a lot of things that Trump was currently trying to do now. And as we know, President Trump is really big on loyalty. And as we've seen in the past, when President Trump is trying to work with his House and his Senate to get bills passed, to get things done, he's not a big fan of opposition. And so if he feels like this is what's best for America, you guys elected me because you believe that I know what's best for America and you have trust in me that I'll execute these plans, then anybody who's getting in the way of that, then I can't support them. And so as strategists, that's something that we understand. We have an end goal and we're supposed to have a team behind us. And people who are diverting, folks away from the team effort,
I understand. You think it's a question of loyalty. Do you concur with that, Mark?
So I think the Congress always had a couple of members who went against the grain of their party.
But specifically, very vocally on Israel.
Comes to mind, is somebody back in the past. And the Republican presidents of the past would kind of go, okay, that's one guy. But I think Trump very much is that you've got to be on my team or else. And I think that's the difference. What AIPAC and the Israelis should be doing right now is figuring out how they get back this younger generation of Americans and really international people that if you go on TikTok for a couple of minutes, your feed is going to have all sorts of videos coming in from Gaza, coming in from southern Lebanon, that's going to show bombs and bloodshed and that sort of thing. And that's a challenge because the Israelis have lost a lot of that support. According to Pew Research, about 60% of Americans have an unfavorable opinion on Israel right now. Those lobbyists from AIPAC, they should also be figuring out how do they help the Americans and how do they help the Israelis figure out what is going to be the cost of peace? What is our end state? What's our mission? And what do we actually need to do to come up with a long-term solution to the Middle East? Is it a two-state solution? Is it bringing in more possibilities? So, for example, what we're seeing now is the Lebanese and the Israelis are finally coming together. Their ambassadors are actually talking to each other. They realize that Hezbollah is their common enemy. That's the way this is going to be solved. And for 47 years, the Americans have been doing funding. They've been trying to do sanctions. They've been trying to do all sorts of things against their enemies and the Israeli enemies. But what did that bring us? It brought us to this war right now, and a negotiation and right now an MOU that isn't a whole lot better than it was a couple of months ago before all this started. So I think it's a lack of policy, and it's a lack of really America and Israel coming together for long-term solutions of how do we actually fix this instead of just continuing to fight.
Understood, Mark. Michaelah, let's talk about the tone, the texture, the very essence of this US-Israeli alliance. I wonder if we can really, after some of the fruity, granular, salty, I think you call it in the US language that's been used by Donald Trump, whether you can still call it a healthy relationship. Because let's bring in some of the things recently said. Here they are on the wall. Take a look. You're expletive crazy. I'm saving your expletive. You'd be in prison if not for me. Everybody hates you. Everybody hates Israel because of this. I mean, I don't know about you, Mark.
When I get on the phone with my best friend, we have a talk like that sometimes, right? And I think that's part of the thing that makes a relationship strong, and that's going to test it as well over the long term. I think that what you're seeing is Trump's lack of patience in this entire situation. He sent the U.S. carriers 14,000 different targets against Iran, and still the regime is there. He's seeing gas prices go up. He's seeing inflation go up. He's going to the G7 this week, and all those fellow world leaders are looking him in the eye and saying, what are you doing here?
Michaelah, I mean, another thing we don't actually have on the wall there, but he Netanyahu, won't have any choice. This is Donald Trump, of course. I call the shots. I call all the shots. He, Netanyahu, doesn't call the shots. I know it's in both sides' interest to kind of play up the friction here, but does that actually sound like someone who's confident in their role as the senior partner?
I think we're dealing with two alpha males here. And so, of course, they're both going to have, arms up, chest out. And I just think that's where we're at. I think that's why we have the rhetoric that we just discussed from Trump, and then you see, the same type of rhetoric coming from Netanyahu. These are two very strong leaders who are very strong-willed and strong-minded, and they probably clash when it comes to figuring out what these solutions are. So, of course, Trump is going to be like, hey, bro, I'm saving you. I'm doing you a favor. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's like, who are you to tell me what am I doing? And at the end of the day, they both know that they have to come together if we are going to find a solution for this, and I do think that that's what we're going to see on Friday.
Let's turn the lens on the other side of the political aisle, because this isn't just a Republican civil war. We're seeing groups like Track AIPAC and Justice Democrats endorsing over 100 primary challengers who pledged to reject pro-Israel donations. Let me play you this clip. All right, so that's a recent convention in Michigan where moderate candidate Haley Stevens was, as you can hear, loudly booed for taking AIPAC money. Michaelah, Mark, I mean, if Netanyahu's lost his bipartisan leverage and the Democratic base is overwhelmingly shifting against this unconditional support for Israel, how can any future administration, whether it's red, whether it's blue, maintain this historic so-called Washington wall, that absolute alignment with Israel?
Well, I think that if there's a problem with absolute alignment with Israel in both parties, then that means that this whole Israel influence idea isn't going to be a threat for much longer. And we can actually focus on other things domestically and other things that our politicians are doing other than what they would like to see or what they're supporting overseas. I think that taking AIPAC money is no different than taking big pharmaceutical money, taking big tobacco money, taking climate groups money or technology money, energy groups' money. I think everybody has interest, and all these groups pour a lot of money into ensuring that representatives who they support are going to, support whatever their interests are. AIPAC happens to be a large lobbying group with a lot of support, and they go around and recruit and ask, hey, can we count on you to help support our initiatives? Every politician has the right to say yes or no.
These initiatives are highly problematic, though, aren't they, Mark?
And every politician has the right to say yes or no, in which case, if they say yes and somebody has a problem with it, we'll see them getting voted out.
Okay.
And if that continues to be a trend, then again, this whole Israel issue won't be as big of an issue as we're making it now, and we'll be able to focus on other things like energy and agriculture. Yeah.
That is the hope. Mark?
I think that AIPAC and the Israelis have a lot of work to do. You know, amongst Democrats, the unfavorable rate is about 80% right now for Israel. And that means that money can do a lot, but it can't buy you what it needs, which is a relationship between the two countries that is sustaining. They need each other. The Israelis and the U.S. need each other. The U.S. needs countries in that region. And especially what we see, likely what's going to happen after this negotiation happens over the next 60 days, America doesn't have a lot of leverage right now. The other thing that's going on is both of these two leaders, Trump and Netanyahu, they have big elections coming up in November. When you have a democratic society like you do in the United States and Israel, you have to listen to your people.
All right, well, on that note, it's really good to hear from both of you. What an interesting take on where we are with American democracy. Michaelah Montgomery, conservative activist and political commentator, and Mark Pfeifle, Republican strategist and former White House Deputy National Security Advisor. Well, that's all from the team here in Washington, D.C. Handing back to Rosalind Jordan and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. See you soon.
Thanks, Neave. Now, don't forget, you can catch this episode or any of our previous ones on our YouTube channel. Al Jazeera English is the search phrase. Now, you can catch a new episode on Wednesday at 18:30 GMT. That's 2:30 p.m. Eastern here in the U.S. But for now, from all the team, thanks for watching.